Hi everyone. On New Year's Eve, the SS Poseidon met with a rogue wave, and a small group of survivors fought their way to escape the sinking ship. Cue the John Williams music and sit back for the Poseidon Adventure. Most people will know the iconic 1972 disaster movie, and some people will also know the novel that it's based on. For those who actually read the novel, you'll be quite surprised that there are many differences between this and the much-loved movie. In our generation, our exposure to this famous story would actually come through the movie, be it the 72 original or its various sequels. But the novel itself was a bestseller, and up until 1972, most people's understanding of that story was through the book itself. For those who haven't read the novel, and who do want to approach it, a word of warning. There is quite considerable differences between the book and the movie, as are generally when a novel or a story is adapted to the screen. And while many elements of the novel are quite faithfully done in the movie, others are not so much. Now let me take you through my copy of the Poseidon Adventure. This is the Penguin 1986 edition, and if my editing skills have improved, you will see a improved version somewhere up here in the top, starboard? Right. Top right corner, you'll see a much better, clearer image of this. And what is I find attractive about this cover image is that the Poseidon is depicted almost as a three-funnel version of the Lusitania, with the original white stripe along its bow before it was moved up. But, as most people know, the Poseidon is based on the Queen Mary. And Paul Gallico, who himself was a novelist, and who wrote about a variety of other things, including, funnily enough, a picture book about kittens, was inspired when he was having dinner on the Queen Mary during one particularly rough voyage, and the Queen Mary was a notoriously rough roller. Well, not so much rough, it was rough oceans, but the ship was just a lazy roller, being that it had a low center of gravity so that when the waves hit it, the ship would hang. So on this particularly rough crossing, he's having dinner, the ship gets struck by a large wave, and the ship leans over onto its side and then takes its sweet time to come back up. In that moment, Paul Gallico had an epiphany. He thought, well, what if? Just what would happen if the Queen Mary did turn completely upside down? How would the survivors try to get out? How could they get through this upside down hell? And this was the genesis for the Poseidon Adventure. When this was published in 1969, it became a tremendous hit, and in 1972, as most people know, it was adapted into the blockbuster movie. We'll get to the movies in a sec, but as a novel, there are an expanded cast of characters, and you will find that the characters involved in here are not so nice. Many of them are, how do I put this? It's a cynical take on people, and some of them you want to like, some of them you feel sorry for, some of them you can't help but laugh at, and I think Paul's goal for this was try to find a cross-section of ordinary people. They are not saints, they are not all entirely sinners, they are just normal people with exaggerated faults, trying to make their way through a highly unlikely scenario. But for me, I can read this, and I've read this too many times, it's falling apart. In fact, this used to belong to my high school, And I borrowed it that many times that when I graduated and was about to leave, the librarians gave me this book and said, go on, have it. It's our gift to you. So I still have it, I still read it. What is the draw card for me to this novel is the descriptions. Poseidon lives, Poseidon dies, everything that happens in between is described in such graphic detail. And for those who have highly visual imaginations, this book is an absolute dream. As it was for me. I pore over the capsize sequences continuously. You may find that he also breaks some storytelling rules. All I will say is that the children are not safe in the novel. And that for the expanded cast of characters, many more survive than what you see within the movie. Also, spoiler alert, in the novel, the Poseidon actually sinks. And it's quite interesting that this quirk then, through the development of the movie, ended up giving the story a different set of sequels. So, anyway, the novel is worth reading, but brace yourselves, because the characters are not the nicest people, and you may be surprised by who survives and who does not. I'll leave it at that. I won't spoil any more. And then also take it as a pleasant surprise when you can relate how similar it is to the movie and how much has been left out. Poseidon Adventure, the novel. So then we now go to everyone's favourite movie from 1972. This is the Blu-ray special edition that was re-released in, I think, 2006 for the last version that hit the screen, and we'll talk about that later. But just to mention this, so the original plan is that the Poseidon would sink, and there is footage out there of a model being mocked up and about to have its final plunge with an explosion and having, the grand send-off. But the budget ran out, and the effect was not anywhere as convincing as the opening shot of the beautiful Queen Mary replica sailing through the water tank, in the rough seas. So it was ditched. And the movie basically ended with the survivors being plucked from the upturned stern and then helicoptered away. Due to the massive success of the movie, Paul Gallico was approached and was asked to then write a sequel novel to the movie. So the original novel, the Poseidon sinks and goes away. He agrees, and he produces a far more pulpy novel about salvagers that come back to the still floating wreck of the Poseidon, and they find some more survivors. I have a hard copy autographed first edition of that novel. Unfortunately, it's in storage, so I can't get to it. But then, as with anything that sells well, that too got a sequel. And this became Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. And in this, even though it almost cost as much as the original, it lacked the charm, and certainly it lacked a lot of the grit and realism of the original movie. But in that one, the Poseidon blows up. Finally, up in a great mushroom cloud of plutonium-fueled explosives. Fast forward to 2005, and there is news that a new Poseidon adaptation is coming out. And so, before the big budget movie comes out, we get this Hallmark version called The Poseidon Adventure. And really, the less said about this, the better. I mean, I don't know why Hallmark decided to produce it, but they did. The ship looks great, a typical balcony-clad, white-hulled cruise ship that gets flipped over by terrorists. Of course, this is the 21st century. And then the survivors have to make their way up through the submerged hull of the ship. Sorry, the capsized hull of the ship. It doesn't submerge until the very end, and it does in a blaze of CGI pixels. And then the following year, 2006, we get Wolfgang Petersen's Poseidon. This ship was designed and inspired by the Queen Mary 2. It's well known that its opening at 2.5 minutes was at the time the most extensive special effects shot ever done. 11 different engines, as in computer engines, were used to create the wave that smashed into the ship and capsized it. This movie is criticized for being too much of a spectacle and having not enough heart, and yes, it is guilty of that. I mean, one less explosion versus 10 more minutes of dialogue and character development would have made a lot of difference, but it's a spectacle. And I don't care what anyone says, for me the 2006 Poseidon movie is a guilty pleasure. I enjoy to just simply have a drink and watch the pixels in action as the ship capsizes, blows up, and then sinks. So it is really to everyone's tastes on which Poseidon they wish to watch and enjoy. I know there is a hardcore group that around 11:30 every New Year's Eve they will put on the movie so that at midnight they do the countdown and then follow the survivors as the wave hits, be it the Poseidon Queen Mary or the Poseidon Queen Mary 2, as it rolls over, and then they have their fun as they watch those survivors try to make their way out of the sinking ships. All that based off a pulpy novel by Paul Gallico, who was inspired after having dinner on the Queen Mary during one rough crossing. Who would have thought one story could lead to 4 movies, a spin-off novel, an absolute die-hard group of passionate fans throughout the world. I mean, just look at the groups on Facebook, look at the DeviantArt online, all reliving that idea of being on an ocean liner as it flips upside down. And on that note, I hope your new year is far better than the preceding one, that there are no more capsizes, and that it is only smooth sailing from here to beyond. And so, as we sail into the new year, all the very best, and happy reading!